Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very glad to see you again. This term, the first semester in 2014. How you spent your winter vacation? Was it helpful? So a week, cold weather. Today it turned to be warmer. Now the campus people are sanguine to attend their lecture and also actually enlivened around the campus scenes and also very fancied. And as agreed, we will regularly meet to learn the American legal system. And our focus in the semester will be given to the law and public policy. So, heavy extent of a lecture will deal with administrative law and the bureaucrats agencies. In legal terms, we often use agencies other than bureaucracy. And you see, the area is closely entwined with a rule of law concept, and you may learn in public law class about the private sphere and eminent a dichotomy between the private and public sphere, and the framework will be very persuasive through many disciplines and key perspective to understand the social science in this contemporary era. So, what is American legal system, and also what is law and public policy? American legal system may be approached in many strands and highlights. For example, what is unionism in United States in early 20s, and what are those subjects, psychology or sociology, to inform the jurors and a judicial branch about the rule and the social implications from their judgment. As Holmes expounds, the law is nothing but a court rulings declared by court in the court law. It is a concept often espoused by common law jurors. And also we may have many distinct parish to be discussed in terms of American legal system. What are school policy and constitutional rulings, public intervention for segregation or desegregation, any familiar matters to be distinct from traditional notion of civil laws and public laws. There is point to be delicate and very esoteric, in some sense esoteric, and orthodox to be developed by the judicial policy. Distinct preserve to be addressed specifically in terms of American legal system. So the course, entitled American Legal System, actually incorporates many issues and subjects other than law and public policy. My intention in this term will be shared a particular focus on law and policy. So your basics about law would arise from the context of administrative law and constitution and separation of powers principle. And the ideal could be cast in aspects. For example, there are three notable ways to approach to perceive what is public administration, and public policy, the relationship between law and public policy, managerial, political, and legal. Three strands are very in prongs and salient to be noticed as we continue to sense through this class. So, for example, we see the trait of public administration is deeply rooted in a managerial perspective, for organizational studies, and many industrial perspective may be applied to public administration. So there is actually a sort of schools of thought, institutionalism, and we consider two phases in terms of institutionalism. For example, old institutionalism and new institutionalism. Old institutionalism heavily involved the kind of organizational study and efficiency to be advocated for a successful organization. Management, the concept of management is crucial to address the truths cherished by those camp of thought. And in a later stage, we see a expansion of that institutional perspective in understanding the society philosophically, particularly stronger in the context of the United States in last century and also. The sociology, psychology, and many strands of philosophical disciplines are intertwined to see the natural dynamism within the institutional perspective. So we call it new institutionalism. In that line of a source, we consider the bureaucracy or a public administration. We have many names to denote the units or branches of a government that is historical and not designed carefully to address the theme. They respond with the public. However, we may see the kind of various names what ad hoc created to respond in some coherence. That is not a deep issue to be discussed in this class. However, you see the context of a realistic names in the shingles, and also other aspect to penetrate the nature of organs in more detail. So the nature and characteristic may differ from the name in expression. Or that also is related with a historical historical understanding of products about governmental branches and units. So we have many names, units, branches, bureaus, and departments, which is largely most responsible in terms of constitutional mandates. So the department would be the maximum extent as to aid the executive power within the Constitution. So you see in the projection, U.S. Department Homeland Security. So actually, the United States developed the governmental units, branches, departments as a piecemeal context. So the creation or expansion of an organization is very piecemeal, and in many cases dealt in parsimonious way or a patchwork to redress the social evils strongly raised in the context of the specific time set. So, U.S. Department on Homeland Security as the department created in response with a ground zero. You know the incident, the tragic September 11th terror. Horrible to force some emergency and a great hostility against terrorism. So that is motive to create this department, and the nomenclature given to this unit is department. It implicates its greatest role. So it's kind of a merger from various organs. For example, the traditional intelligence service, CIA, or FBI, and many other security-related bureau units were integrated to be responsible to the sole organ. So it kind of a positional and line hierarchy was instituted to report to the department and finally to the President of the United States. So you are now also introduced to the figures depicting in box form the federal government of the United States. So 3 branches were constitutionally delegated their power, and of course the separation of powers principle is in primacy to understand the governmental powers in the United States. You see a complicated aspect about the role of branch department, role of each branch, and also its constitutional power prescribed in the Constitution: executive, the legislative, the judiciary. The Article 1 provides the legislative, the Congress. It is a term to denote both houses, a House of Representatives and Senate. So bicameralism was institutionalized in the United context, context of a constitutional government. You see, actually, you may well versed with the history, democratic history, revolution, a civil revolution in 18th and 19th century, and 17th centuries in Great Britain. So French Revolution, and also the independence war waged by United States against the rule of monarch, which is should be arbitrary for the revolts, and so revolutionary spirit has been strong against exploitation, excessive tax, and others. And new wealthy class in the new continent has their basis in European states, notably Pilgrim Fathers, and who are those? The noble class. However, in struggle because of the religious belief and any second nature of nobility in mainland Britain or others. So their basis is a commercial capital. Otherwise, many first-rate nobility would favor agriculture and land ownership. So they represent actually the growth of a gradual growth of a capitalistic paradigm, and also their interest, what actually is pivotal and about the commercial assets and the new wares. So many academicians perceive their private interest is very influential to shape the new republic in the continent, and their intention is primary to protect the commercial interest. And of course, in the course of a struggle, you may see some domestic nature in spirit about the interest of agrarian class in certain states and industrial capitalists in northern states, you see. So the plutocracy argument is very persuasive to understand the advent of a new constitutional state in the continent. So the idea had been collected in the form of essays, very influential and intelligent, to address the many issues and agendas about a statecraft and a desired form of a democratic rule. So, for example, Madison and Hamilton would see the judiciary is important. What is major reason to raise that kind of a advocate? So judicial branch is a bulwark to protect the key essences of private interest, a property right, freedom of contract. So they saw it pivotal to design the constitution. So the kind of idea was strongly advocated by them. And also, separation of powers principle should be respected, since the arbitrary power is actually a greatest potential of enemy against the private interests. And caveat, it is actually true that the incentives, private motives, commercial interest, kind of elements is essential to wheel ahead the capitalistic paradigm of production, and also that is the actually main force to realize the current standard of civilization was splendid and superb. So our materialistic standard, welfare had been increased so remarkably. Have you ever chance to meditate the times of a classic rule and the modern democratic civilization? So revolutionary in terms of material ways of subsistence. So they actually espouse the idea about a separation of powers principle and the check and balance scheme. A tripartite plan of government is essential to shape a desired status of a constitution. And that is also pivotal to not only to address the liberty interest, but also support the idea about limited government. So the human right, limited government is ideal form of a rule they perceived. So the civilian force and potential is considered to be overwhelming about a stalemate of a monarchy or others. How do you consider their ambition? So actually, it proves we could not be correct if we unilaterally criticize the propensity about a plutocracy or protection of the private wealth. Actually, it may be acumen to lead the political regime of a new continent. And also, the principle expects a three branches practice in checking law against the exercise of power by other branches. So the legislative may have a constitutional tool to redress the arbitrariness of the executive, and judiciary may be preserved, may within the preserve against two branches about correction and remedies, others. For example, have you heard of a legislative veto? An institution to be implemented, to be embraced by a legislature, but struck down as unconstitutional by the judiciary. The case was exactly gone in concerns of a separation of powers principle. Legislative actually only be legislative within the constitutional framework, and no express language conferred on the legislative about other nature of a constitutional powers. So it should be legislative, and given that impasse, the legislative can only be legitimate to respect the constitutional protocol about the legislation. So the resolution should be presented to the review of President about the context of a constitutional veto and others. So signature is essential, since the executive branch is principal organ to implement the bill, laws, the statute. So they have to have chance to review the statute. So the president's signature will finalize the statute for enforcement as of national law. So the legislative veto impermissibly forwent the process prescribed by Constitution. So it contravenes the constitutional mandate, so must be struck down. What are others? A notable case you see in the casebook, and we may have chance to review Youngstown Steel case. The case arose in the context of Korean wartime, and as you see, this classic document has no provision about emergency power by the U.S. presidency. You see no statutory ground or provision explicitly, but the time is emergent, and the steel industry should be in collaboration, and also must keep in phase to respond with national needs. So the labor strike, what is context of unionism, may impede the goals of nation. That could not be tolerated by the judiciary, might be, and President Truman actually seized the private assets and others for the purpose of a responsive war, and so how do you see it could be legitimated in terms of federal Constitution of the United States? So implied power could be inferred by ways of interpretation or any other constitutional wisdom. So actually the Constitution may be the source of legal vacuum at most extent, perhaps, since it should be principled and includes the a limited scope of a crucial system about government. So vacuum or ambiguities or vagueness may be more chances than other statute norms or executive decree or orders. So the interpretive work is heavily required to understand correct law of a U.S. Constitution. So then who is finally responsible about that important work? It's actually the twilight in area of twilight, which is not that definite in one sense, so amenable to many possibilities about understanding. So the president may be a final interpreter, and key public offices also focus their effort in carrying their public duty. So what is the provision of Constitution? What is a source of our duty, basically, about this travels and the public agendas, difficult public agendas. So they have to be kept constant about the constitutional mandate, and interpretive authority may be found in many elements, and bureaucrats, a congressman, president, and Supreme Court justices, court justices. Notably, the dichotomy now is actually prevalent and undeniable in the context of a United constitutional history between a weak and strong president, who is a Taft. Is he a strong presidency advocate? How about Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt? Did he support a weak presidency? We do not generally agree. Franklin Roosevelt may embrace a powerful presidency, a big government, and launch of many public programs and a welfare paradigm of a nation were strongly pursued during his term. About William Taft. So you see in the picture summaries about the U.S. government, 3 branches, and the separation of powers ideal has been also reincarnated in terms of a Congress. So bicameralism adopted, House of Representatives and the Senate. Key elements about these organs is the projection, for example, about House of Representatives. Number varies according to state population, but currently 435 congressmen, and House of Representatives are expected to be elected by the states, and they hold office for 2 years. And in order to be elected, they have to satisfy an age requirement. It must be over 25, and he or she must be registered in the state they are standing for, and must have been a U.S. citizen for 7 years, and can overrule presidential veto within 2/3 majority, can make laws with Senate, and can declare war with Senate. How about the Senate? Qualification about senators and the key element of a constitutional powers. And bicameralism may vary across the global jurisdictions. Generally, we consider House of Representatives and Senate is in balance and equal footing about the scope of a power and extent of a practical influence in terms of United States politics. And 2 senators for each state, elected by the states. The senators hold office for 6 years, so longer than House of Representatives, and must be over 30, and must have been a U.S. citizen for 9 years. Can make laws with House of Representatives. Approves or rejects a presidential appointments, diplomats, ambassadors, Secretary of State, and Justice of Supreme Court. So the presidential power in the United States is actually extensive and very influential if to nominate key officers in terms of constitution and level of a statutory position. So that is actually one constitutional issue. What is the scope of appointed power conferred upon the President of the United States? And the role of Senate also is very important about this appointment power, diplomacy. And this power is exclusively granted within the Senate. House of Representatives and no say or influence about this appointment power. And one other difference may be found in terms of a treaty-making power. And the Senate also has exclusive power about approval of a treaty and others. And the executive are constituted by the president, one president and one vice president, and executive department. And the president is elected by the people in a general election. So independent election is expected to be held to step the constitutional post. That is one strand you need to understand about the presidential system of government. Often the parliamentary system originated from United Kingdom, Great Britain, and held one general election. So the members of parliament are to be elected in one general election. The majority party who prevails general election are responsible to organize the government. So the head of a majority party would serve as a prime minister, who plays the same role of similar role with the president in the presidential system. And also there are immediate form of a democratic government. For example, the presidency would be nominal and symbolic, as in parallel with a modern monarch in the democratic constitutional state. In that case, the prime minister would undertake a practical role to govern and respond with constitutional duty. So we can see the United States Constitution as a classic paradigm of a presidential system. So independent election and stricture embedded in the separation of powers principle had long been respected. Of course, the weakness, that is one points of weakness found in the presidential system, a long stalemate if two branches are in conflict, as you see in the past case, sequestration, for example, great deaths of government had been acutely attacked by a sequestration, and also you can see some intrinsics and also as reality because of the differences in system. And the vice president is chosen by the presidential candidate, and he holds office for 4 years. And you can see gradual expansion of executive departments of history, 14 of them, defense and treasury, and the last department created was in response with the terrorism, the tragic terrorism, ground zero, as I've introduced, Department of Homeland Security, and headed by the executive departments, headed by secretaries of state, cabinet ministers, and they're appointed by the president, and no set term for holding office. And the departments are expected to provide administrative help for the government. And the United States is what original state about a judicial review, and as you see, because of a federal system in the U.S. Constitution, the judiciary in the United States is very important to manage the federal system. So very complicated about a statecraft and what a public policy. And federalism often raises a delicate constitutional issue So the federalism of the United States could be defended by the judiciary in very influences. One Supreme Court, and the Chief Justice is nominated by the President if approved by the Senate, and Chief Justice of the Supreme Court hold office for life. So lifetime tenure ensured as a matter of law, and 9 justices and 1 Chief Justice. And their role is to interpret federal laws according to the Constitution. And you see in the Constitution of the United States, the Federal Supremacy Clause. And actually, the hierarchy of norms are not explicit about the types of federal laws, Constitution, and statute, and treaty. Treaty is one kind of federal laws. The express intent, declared in the Constitution, only involves the hierarchy between a set of federal laws and state laws. So federal laws preempt the state laws in any extent. So the lowest level of federal law would legitimately obliterate the effect of a highest state laws. Of course, the practical consequence is not so direct or immediate, so a little differs from a pure theoretical perspective. For example, the federal court often respects the independent ground of state about the judgment of a Supreme Court of state or others. In any case, in theory, the lowest level of federal law could invalidate the highest Supreme Court. So the hierarchy among federal laws are dubious and not expressly set forth in United States Constitution. It's actually a judicial review, and its tradition originated from case laws itself. The judicial branch itself devised the rationale and ground about constitutional review against statutes, treaties, and others. So you know what the notorious case, a Marbury versus Madison, and Chief Justice John Marshall spelled out very eloquently, actually considered to be shrewd about his needs. In any case, the final outcome of case is actually not desired by the governing party. He has favored a party, but the logic and rationale elicited in Marbury versus Madison are the ground to support the judicial review. So it's kind of a constitutional practice embedded over 2 centuries, very hard. And actually, some scholars, in some cases, raises the anti-majoritarian difficulty within its institutions. So it's actually very orthodox and unique, very very pounding, however, over its successors and followers. So it had been exported to other countries. For example, we also recognize the constitutional review about a political decision, a statute law passed by Congress, and decrees or orders of executive branches. The idea is actually rooted in higher law concept of, the names of Blackstone or Sir Coke. So the British monarch is very fierce and suppressive. So the common law lawyers are very prudent and persistent to support their ideas. And their concept is so the natural ideas, for example. And of course now is in parallel with the sorts of legal positivism. However, they see some areas or divine elements entrenched within legal culture and legal system. So it is inviolable, inalienable, the kind of a democratic forefronts in South were enlivened actually in the United States soils in 1980s and 18th centuries or 19th century. How do you see? And they also see it plausible about political distrust. What is politics? It's truly fierce and altering, so no vested rights concept, a dominant force in agreement, in name of agreement, could abrogate every sphere of our public lives. How do you see it as a consequence? So some prudent system may well function to ensure the natural justice. So that is the backdrop about the role of Supreme Court, you see. And the Supreme Court can reject laws passed by Congress if it feels they are unconstitutional. And only an amendment to the Constitution can overturn its decisions. And we have lower federal courts, which should be 14 in district level, and over 90 in federal districts across the country. And 14 appellate circuit courts, federal circuits, which is an appellate court. So we can see 3 or 4 tiers of a judicial court in the United States, and they review may be remanded 4 times in pinnacle involving the Supreme Court of a federal government. And also, you see the dual sovereignty within the United States. So it is federal union, and many interests within the state power have been reserved for the state government. So the scope of a federal power actually should be limited to the terms and conditions and provisions by the federal constitution. That is not already true, but roughly true over history in the United States, the federal power would be expanded, and in practices and in the court rules. So you see two notable cases about this tendency. So what is commerce clause and what is necessary and proper clause. So that is an avenue that the Supreme Court are grounded to expand the federal powers. That tendency is related with the bureaucracies and public administration in the United States. So in the 4th century and 19th century, the federal government executive powers of the United States is very limited to address a limited scope of a public agenda. Actually, it increases gradually around the late of 19th century and early 20th centuries, and is exploded in New Deal's era. And the tendency could also be charted in terms of a conservative and a Democratic Party. A Republican Party often be attributed as conservative, and public programs and other social welfare statutes are limited. If that were not the case, the public program still is limited. So you see in later class the statistics to address the number of public programs within the changing administration. So, for example, Bush administration, Father Bush and son Bush. We see limited number of public programs, a smaller number of public programs, which is relatively so. And also we have some majority number in Clinton administration and others. And the heydays of public administration would be in 1970s, perhaps. And so we have witnessed the rush of public programs and many social welfare legislation. So it is actually important a decade in understanding the role of a U.S. administrative state. So in this class, we'll begin with the theme, why administrative law? And we'll be given 5 themes, which will be dealt in about 3 of them in this class, and we may have chance to review others later class. So on a weekly basis, you are expected to learn the basics and fundamentals through the substantial aspect of public administration, and finally judicial review. So the class scheme would respond with rigidity in first, and through flexibility about a public administration and its legal control involving a judicial review. So at first glance, we have to consider the constitutional structure of government, and administrable law, which provides a practical ground about the role and responsibilities of a public officers. And we will meditate on some points considered important by exercising questions. For example, what self-interest reasons a corporation would have for supporting the regulatory laws? So, and reflect on the nature of power. What would the powerful have that the less powerful lack? So it would be a sequence in type of the class progress. I hopefully expect to keep with this format. I'm not sure to faithfully respond. Have you had any chance to see to read the literature? Kafka's is a very harsh context for a deprived class of society. So unresponsible and unfashionable public administration may aggravate the poverty class. So the context is rooted in the advent of modern administrative state. So the C1 is entitled A Brief History of the Administrative State. Bureaucratic government has existed in varying degrees in nearly all organized political systems. Modern American bureaucratic government has been shaped by American by a belief that the dominant free market economic system cannot meet certain important social needs. So you can be easy about the major aspect of capitalistic development. So what is a free market economy and what are a social needs? How do you reconcile the tension and conflict raised in these two dimensions? Administrative power grew to offset the tremendous economic, social, and political power. Another form of a organization, large private business enterprises, accumulated in the 19th century. So we'll continue review after short break the 5 themes, and we'll have chance to read 2 stories in a purpose of presenting the backdrop about administrative state and others. One is article reported by Kevin Sack entitled Mississippi Reveals Dark Secrets of Racist Time. And another is an excerpt from Mississippi from the New York Times, and it is entitled Excerpts from Mississippi on a Black. Okay, I'll come back after short break. I'll see you.